The Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by italki. Become fluent in any language.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, it's a little later. Took a little bit of time to get set up. So my name is Alexander Ferguson. This is my first time here at the Polyglot Conference. This is an amazing experience. But that's actually part of why I'm talking about this, because I haven't been able to make it to a Polyglot gathering or conference or anything until this one right now. So to give you a little idea of what we're going to do here, I'm going to present a little bit, but I also am going to ask you guys to participate now and then, just a little bit, because what I'm going to tell you about is based on my own experience on creating a group where I live, which is Seattle, Washington, in the northwest of the United States. We have different cultural norms than some of you might have. We have different access to different resources or facilities than some of you might have. So you guys might have really good ideas about ways to accomplish some of the same things that I'm going to talk about that make more sense in your country, in your culture, or wherever it is that you happen to live or be. So every once in a while, if you have something that you want to share, there will be opportunity for that, or just raise your hand. I'll try and pick you out. So a little bit about myself and my experience. I went to university for linguistics and for Chinese and French. And when I was studying, I had a lot of friends who studied different languages and friends from other countries that were there studying English. I studied in the States. And I, as a student, had the opportunity to speak languages all the time. Who was at Richard's talk this morning about, okay, it's an okay number. So one of the things he talked about was being able to use the languages and how that's part of your motivation. If you have it a part of your lifestyle, getting to speak this language, that keeps you going. For me, that's very true. If I'm not able to use the language, I stop speaking it. I don't practice on my own as much. My wife might disagree with me. She'd probably say that I still babble and say random things all the time, but I don't really improve. So after I graduated, I didn't have that same community of different language learners and language speakers and polyglots around me. A lot of my friends moved other places, I moved other places, and now I'm a web programmer. I work for myself at home, so I spend a lot of the day in my apartment talking to nobody. And it's a bit isolating, and I talk. I am talking to nobody. I'm not just not talking to anybody. But it means that I went from this experience that was not as large or amazing as the Polyglot gathering is, but was this constant exposure to nothing. And I've done that for several years now. And that was difficult for me because obviously, like the rest of you, I love languages. So I wanted to speak with people, and that I knew that would keep me going. So I decided to start up a group in Seattle for polyglots and language geeks and nerds and lovers, and see what happens. So what I did is I went on, and I'll get into more details about this as we go through. I went to meetup.com and I looked to see if there was anything in the area, and there wasn't, or at least not close enough for me. And I created a group and started having meets, and I'll tell you more about what that is. And so a lot of my experience is about what went right and what went wrong, and how I can improve on that, and how you guys can learn from my mistakes and create a great experience in a great community of your own. So first things first, please don't reinvent the wheel. Has anybody here done any sort of community organizing or had created clubs or anything like that? Okay, so all of you who have done that before, you know that it takes a lot of effort to actually maintain it and keep it going. And for those of you, don't worry, I will say things you already know, but hopefully there will be new things here too. But it takes some time, it takes some effort. I don't want you to just work really hard when you don't have to. There may very well be groups in your area that are already formed for language lovers or polyglots. Like, for example, I live in Seattle, and despite there being a lot of people who move there for work from all over the world, there isn't that much in terms of there weren't groups already in place. But 2 hours north across the Canadian border in Vancouver, there's a large and thriving polyglot community. So you have to look. Yeah, and it's important to really give an effort for that, because you'll save yourself a lot of time if you find something. So some places that you might want to also look, not just for groups that already exist, but also groups that might be excited about what you're doing and help support you. You could look for cultural centers. Another example of in Seattle, both cultural centers and heritage museums. There's a large Scandinavian population in Seattle, so we have a Nordic heritage museum, and we have groups that promote multiple Scandinavian languages and teach them. So there's actually a thriving Scandinavian language community. And I've already connected with some of those people, and that made a real difference in what I was trying to do. So you can look there. You can look for the language-specific clubs. Maybe there's an English-speaking club, a French-speaking club, a Spanish-speaking club, Chinese, and really start asking, hey, you speak this, do you speak anything else? Are you looking for something like this? Because you might find people who want to promote more. And of course, if you're a student, look at your own school, see if you can start your own community, see if there are any groups that are already doing that. I know of a group on the East Coast out of GW East Coast of the United States, pardon me, out of GW, called GLN, the Global Language Network, that promotes a lot of language learning. And so you can check if your school has something like that. Don't do work you don't have to. So just to tell a little bit about what my experience was, I started the group, the Seattle Polyglots is what we called it, about a year ago. And it ran until February. It's still running now, but I left at the beginning of February for Vietnam, and I haven't been back to Seattle yet. So that was an interesting learning experience to talk about what happened to the group after that. But during that time, I used meetup.com. I used it because it was easy to keep things organized. That's not the only way to do this. We can talk about some of those things later as well, but it was helpful. I could look at who was members, how many members I had. I could communicate with members. That was very beneficial. And in the course of that time, by February, there were 99 people that were members. That's the only problem with something like Meetup, is they've signed up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they come to any events or any meetings. But 25 of them actually showed up at least once, and of people that, there were 7 people that actually came frequently. So even though 7 might not seem like a lot, when you look around you right now, when you go from 0 to 7 and you're like, hey, I have 6 other polyglots that I get to hang out with on a regular basis, that's a pretty great feeling. So, so keep that in mind. And of everybody that showed up, all of them spoke, it's to some degree, at least 3 languages. And of the people that showed up regularly, and the majority of them really spoke in some conversational way, at least 5. So it was really, it really tapped into the enthusiasts that were there. We had, my main focus was, because I wanted to practice speaking, having something kind of like the arigatoreo, having just the language mingling time. There were other things that we did, but we ended up having 2 bi-weekly meets. So it was 1 week, one type of meet, and then it was all languages, and then the other was just Romance languages, which we did because it turned out there were a lot of people who spoke Romance languages. So we would do any Romance language goes. You can just speak in those, and we go back and forth. And when I asked everybody what kind of things they'd like to do, and the majority of people were interested in conversation, in going out to eat places, maybe for food of certain cultures and having a cultural experience, other types of cultural events, and presentations, a lot like what we're doing here. I mean, basically, everybody was interested in having a little mini polyglot gathering on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, which it might seem a little intimidating, but it's actually quite doable. So this is important. Doing something like this takes planning. It is not, if you're stressed out at the idea of organizing events, this might be hard for you, because you do have to continually follow up and continually work on the group. Otherwise it doesn't really grow, it doesn't really happen. But there are some things that you can do if you're organized about it to help focus. And it's really just the questions. This might seem really obvious, but it turns out it's not. There are a lot of things you just assume and then find out you made a bad assumption. So, What, where, how, who, how, and when. So what kind of group do you want to create? Right? I wanted a group where I could talk with people. I wanted a group where we could have conversations like this, or ones like all the others that you guys have gone to and that I've gone to while I've been here, about what certain languages are like, or how we can improve our languages, or just play games in languages. Just do various things like that. And it's important to have that in mind from the beginning, because when you're trying to promote something like a group, you need to communicate with the potential members why it is that they want to come. If you just say, hey, Polyglot group, you could get people with totally different ideas of what's going to happen and what you're going to do, and you don't want to just have people come and be disappointed. So really have an idea in mind, of what it is that you want to do in your group. So some example things: conversation practice, tips and tricks and hacks and things like that, which we've all talked about. Cultural exploration, by that I mean maybe there's a cultural event that happens for some minority group in your, or foreign group in your city, and you as a group go to that event. We did that a couple times in Seattle. Language oddities and presentations and such, kind of like the various, like the one that was in this room just a moment ago on Romani, things of that nature. Mini language lessons, kind of like the Turkish 101 that just happened. Or maybe as a group trying to work towards a language, a higher language proficiency. Maybe, in Seattle we have a lot of Vietnamese speakers, and we have a lot of Somali speakers. So maybe as a group going, hey, let's all engage with our own community and learn Somali together, because it's always easier when you have other people working on something like that with you. And then language games of various sorts, right? These are just some ideas. And I'm curious if anybody has any ideas of other stuff that you might want to do in a group. If you want to bring that up, please, just raise your hand and give some suggestions, because yeah, it's always beneficial for everybody. The other thing, and this is actually very important, is where will you meet? At first, this might seem like not a big deal. It's not the first thing that crosses your mind, but it makes a big difference, because most of our meetings were in cafes. The reason we chose that is because Seattle has a lot of coffee and a lot of cafes, and so it's very easy to do that. And it's easy to find a cafe where people can go and get something very inexpensive, so it's not going to cost people a lot of money to participate. It's easy. A lot of people drive in Seattle, so it's easy for people to park in some of the outlying cafes. So that was our particular way of meeting. But I know that there are places where libraries have rooms. You can rent or check out meeting rooms. That doesn't work as well in Seattle, it turns out, if you want to plan ahead of time, but you can do that. There are cultural centers that might be open to giving you space. You could meet at people's houses. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment. It really wasn't a good place to invite people over to, particularly since I work at home. But a lot of groups do just say, hey, we can meet at my house. We have this space, and everybody can meet there. You can meet in the park if the weather permits. Summertime, that's great. We did that a lot. So, there are a lot of options, but it's important to think about it ahead of time, because you might not know what kind of roadblocks you come up against. Talking about my experience with the cafes, the cafes are generally good, but a lot of people go to cafes in the States to work and to study, and sometimes when you're sitting around chatting, it gets loud, and we have gotten complaints before. And so it's one of the problems that I'm working on right now when I go back about what do I want to change about the group to make sure that we can keep meeting without frustrating the very community that we're a part of. So it's important to really explore this. With that in mind, it's the wrong direction. Brainstorm it, but right now I'm wondering, does anybody else have any ideas of places or ways you could meet that aren't on this list that you might want to share with anybody? Yeah? I'm sorry, I actually can't hear you. I didn't think about that when I asked that. I should probably get
the microphone. What's that? Testing, testing.
Yeah, with my group, the most popular ones are where we go off for a walk together in the countryside, or cycle ride or something like that.
Right, going on a cycle ride, going on a walk, going hiking, or yeah, absolutely. There's a group in Seattle.
Or playing a sport together, sort of something like that.
Exactly. And in some cases, that's that might be a weather permits situation, where if it's raining, if you're in Seattle and it's raining, it's not as big of a deal. People are used to that. But if it's raining where you live, it might be a big deal. People might not want to do it. But then they're also doing indoor sports as well if it's raining or something. That's a good idea. Anything else anybody can think of? Yeah? I'll repeat it if you... Sorry, I'm making you run around with that.
That's fine.
I run a language cafe in Ferrara in Italy, where I live, and we found a cafe that's also a restaurant. And on Saturday afternoons they're closed as a cafe, and then they open up at 6:30 as a restaurant. And so we agreed with them, and they open up just for us on Saturday afternoons, which means we have the whole cafe for us.
Which
means
great.
we can
That's
guarantee 30 places.
Can you ask them to open up a cafe in Seattle for me?
I can try.
No, that's really fantastic, because the issue that I've come across with the cafe is also, we have the conversation time, but doing something like this, having a presentation, you really can't do that in a cafe with people around studying for their exams. So that's a really good find, and if any of you just happen to know people who own a cafe and or a restaurant that does something like that, go for it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Antje. I had developed an own event format called Vision Talk, and I have created a community in Berlin of visionaries who would gather once a month, or I would invite them once a month to gather and share their visions and help each other to make them come true. And my experience is that when I started to offer outdoor things, that very few people would show up, interestingly.
Right.
But I found a host for every month, so I did it every month in a different place. And I would find these hosts from the community, actually, because in the beginning of each meeting I would present the idea and the format. And I said I'm constantly looking for interesting hosts, so I would try to find, for example, startups or associations or whatever who would like to present themselves at the beginning. I would give them 10 minutes for free, like to present what they do, what is the place about where we are, where we gather, and they would love to do it. And then there was the space for us to network and to do what we do.
Absolutely, that's a great idea, and that goes back to let's see if I can figure out which button. To the question about not reinventing the wheel and connecting with partner groups, because that very same thing could be, maybe you have multiple cultural centers. You have a East African culture. I'm just saying the ones that are in Seattle because it's easy to remember. But you have an East African cultural center and a refugee center and a Japanese cultural center, and you might be able to rotate through to also promote interest that people have in local communities. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. So far away. Okay, we'll move on, but if there are other things that you guys come up with, we can talk about it at the end. I want to make sure we can get through everything. This might seem like a weird question. Who will be a part of your group? And I don't mean this in an exclusionary way. I mean that you need to keep in mind that you can't just go out there saying, okay, anybody and everybody, whatever happens, happens, because then you're not being focused enough. It's kind of like when you approach a language. You don't just learn any random phrase. You actually try and be a bit systematic about it. And this is because, let's say, maybe, here's just a simple question, do you want to make this about anybody in the community, or maybe you're a student and you're really aiming at other students, or maybe you are into cycling, as this gentleman was talking about, they go out on cycling or do other activities like that, and what you'd like to do is find polyglot cyclers. That might be a little too restricted. If you found, I'd be amazed if somebody here has a group of 15 polyglot cyclers, like, wow, well done. But that is actually something that's being used for a lot of endangered languages revivals, like cycling groups for Irish Gaelic speakers to help keep people involved in the language. So it is important to think about that. Yeah, Neil, what was your...
Yeah, that's absolutely important. There's a Chinese meetup happening in Berlin on a twice monthly basis, and there's also one, the same group meets, or the same meetup group meets additional times a month, but those 2 slots are designated for language learning. And if somebody wants to do a German-Chinese exchange, we've put up boundaries to say when we meet together, it's all in Chinese, or primarily in Chinese. It's great that you meet somebody, but that extra exchange then will need to take place elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And that boundary is something that becomes very clear to people. And then the rest of the time we go out for dinners and things like that.
Absolutely.
Where it's not super rigid. For example, after 2 hours or 3 hours, we can then switch to whatever language you want. But the focus really does remain that way then.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've actually come across the issue with the idea of this type of exchange or that boundary. A lot of people see the word language or polyglot and they realize it's about language and they go, well, I'm not from the States and I'm here to study English and I really just want to go practice English. And there are a lot of English corners and English practice groups out there. And I have to say, hey, you can come if you want, but we actually try not to speak in English very much because everybody here speaks English and it's not, so that it is important to keep that in mind. That's a great point. Yeah.
This has to do with where and who. I lived in New York City for a brief time, and there was a really large group on Meetup called the Polyglot Bar.
See, there you go.
Okay.
Wish we had that.
And
maybe mine will become the Polyglot Bar. Okay.
Well, you might not wish that actually, because depending on Seattle, I don't know what the demographic is like, but it tended to attract sort of people who weren't doing. They weren't going. Yeah, how surprising. Right? Wow, it attracted these people who just kind of wanted to date, and it wasn't really about.
Right. It was about dating and drinking.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a very good point.
So I'm wondering, if anywhere that's alcohol related is going to be a good place to meet in the first place.
Right.
And secondly, what kind of restrictive capacity you have as the community organizer to change who's coming and what they're there for and everything.
Well, that's important. That's part of why I made it at cafes, because there were a couple groups that were doing some language specific or kind of region specific meets, and they were usually at cocktails because that's what a lot of people in Seattle do, is go drink cocktails. And that's great if what you want to do is go drink cocktails, but why don't you just go do that separate, So yeah, and is alcohol, no, I mean, that's not really inclusive, right? There are people who don't drink alcohol, and there are people who, maybe they're in high school, and in the States, you can't drink until you're 21, so, I mean, plenty of people do, but you're not supposed to. And so yeah, you don't want to make it something really restrictive unless that's really the demographic you're looking for. If you want to create a group that's for polyglot drinking buddies, you go ahead, but be explicit about it. That's really what it comes down to. You need to make sure you talk to the people who join and say, all right, just so you know, this is what we're actually looking to do. So yeah, thank you for that. The other question along those lines is, how do you want to find these members? If you know who it is you're looking for, do you want to just do like what I did? Is I wanted to start with Meetup and see what happened. So I created the Meetup group and I didn't promote it. I just waited. Well, I mean, I tweeted a couple times, hey, if you're in Seattle, but I really just waited. So a lot of people look on Meetup and then they just say, oh, I would like to try this, and they just join. And so that's a very passive way of starting off. You may or may not want to do that. Depends on if people use something like Meetup, but maybe you create a Facebook group and you link to it and send people to it and post about it. Maybe you create or maybe you go to bulletin boards. In the States, a lot of cafes have bulletin boards. You can post up flyers. I know plenty of people who do that for their own groups. Maybe you're on a campus and you talk with departments saying, hey, we're doing this. Can I talk in front of the class for a minute to just tell them about this group that's upcoming? When you know who it is that you want in your group, it's easier to figure out how you're going to get them to know about and even come to your group. If you skip that question of who it is you want, you're just wasting time. You know, it's a marketing question. Does anybody here do marketing as a job? Okay, there's a old joke. It's unfortunately very true that 50% of my marketing works. I just don't know which 50%. And if you don't figure out who it is you're aiming for, that's the boat you're going to be in. You're going to just be trying things, and who knows what's happening. So really focus on the who. Whoa. How did that happen? Okay. All right, we'll try just using the keyboard. We basically started brainstorming this. So how do you want to organize the meeting? How do you want to communicate with others? Do you want to use email lists? Does that seem dated for you? Is it a population you're talking to where they really don't look at their email? Or are you looking for a group of people that really do use their email a lot? Do you have a location where you can post up on a bulletin board, our next meeting is here, so that people can always see it and pass by, like we go and see the schedule? Do you want to use social media to let people know when the next events are coming or if changes happen? I apparently put email lists twice because I think they're important. No, I don't use email lists. So maybe I'm telling myself I should. Do you maybe the way that you set up your group, your community, you have actual membership. Maybe you have something online and people sign up as a member so you can communicate with them that way. And you set up something there. That takes a little more time and effort, but if you can do that, that might be a good way to go. Or maybe use something like a messaging app. Now, I haven't tried this, but I've been thinking of using WhatsApp to communicate, because the emailing, the messaging process on Meetup I find very frustrating. And it might be nice to have just a group WhatsApp that I can use and say, hey, we're going to do this. Is anybody, we're going to meet here or there or the other. So, there are some ideas like that. Is there anything else that people have tried that doesn't fit in that category that's been really effective for them, or that they think would be worth trying? If not, it's not a big deal. Don't everybody speak at once. Okay. And then this question of when is also important. It's not just, do I want to meet on Thursday nights or Wednesday nights? That could be really important based on where you are. Maybe Thursday nights is the night everybody goes out and parties. Thursday's the new Friday. But maybe that's not really the question. So when I started off the group, we met very infrequently because I didn't know where was the best place or how often people should meet. So first it was one day, and then about a month later, and then some random other day, because I was trying to find a day that everybody could come to. And it might take a while. You might go, okay, we're going to try Sundays, and then you find out, no, actually, our community, there are a lot of polyglots that are actually very religious and go to church on Sundays and can't meet. Maybe that's not the best day if we want to get them there. So maybe Saturdays are better. And you try that around, but also think to yourself, is meeting every week too much? Will people not come if they go, okay, I was there last week, I really don't need to go this week? There's something to be said about having a little bit less frequent so that people are excited because they are not just being beat over the head with your meetup. So these are important questions. How often do you want to meet? And also, do you want it to be really, really scheduled, what the meeting looks like? Do you want people to show up and you're like, all right, we're going to introduce ourselves. There's some new people. Hello, their names. Now we're going to talk about something. There's maybe a pre-decided theme to talk about, and then we'll just have mingling and conversation. Or do you want to just show up and say, oh great, let's just sit down and talk to people? You've probably all experienced both of those types of things with different groups. Some of those things work better for you and for your group than others, and you might want to experiment. But keep that question in mind. If something's not working and you're just letting people come and sit down and just talk, maybe you should try creating a schedule. Maybe you should say, all right, we're going to meet up, we're going to do this, we're going to do this and this, and see how that goes. Maybe people are really resistant to it. You have to kind of work with the group, because it's not just you. You're just a guide, right? And you have to adjust what you're doing. And then that's along those same lines, though, if you do want to have talks, you do want to have conversation, do you want to schedule that ahead of time? Kind of like we see these booklet of what the talks are going to be. Do you want to say, hey, next week we're going to talk about why we think nobody in the US actually learns Catalan, or and if we think that it's important, and everybody should prepare for that? Or do you want to just be like, okay, hey, I just thought of this last night, let's talk about this, play around. That's pretty much the same thing. Now, once you have the group in place, it's important to ask yourself if you're actually ready to make it bigger. That might seem like a very weird thing, right? You're just thinking, because for me, it took a little while for the group to actually grow, and for me to get to having 7 regular people, which to me is actually, that's a very welcome number. I would love to see it bigger, but that's a great number. When you have your group going, are you ready to have it double in size? Are you ready to have the amount of people that show up go up? You need to ask yourself this question, because you might not be ready. You might think, oh, that would be great, but you're actually meeting in a cafe that turns out is very, very busy when you meet up. And if your group doubled in size, you wouldn't have anywhere to sit, and then all of a sudden you have a new problem on your hands. Where are we going to meet now, and how is that going to change everything? If we move to another space, are fewer people going to show up? You have to plan that ahead of time. So when you have a group, if you want to actively grow it, you need to ask yourself if you actually want to actively grow it. And you also want to wait, because if something's not working, if there's something that's awkward about the meetup, or if there's something that you're still trying to fix it first. Make it really solid. Make the meetup really functional before you try and make it very large. The general idea is that you don't want low quality growth. You want good quality growth. You want to have a good group that grows as a good group, as opposed to having a group that kind of functions and then a lot of people show up, but maybe half the time you don't really speak in languages or about languages, and maybe half the people are there to drink, and maybe, if that's happening, you need to focus in more. You need to really make the group work before you do anything to change it. So these are just important things to keep in mind. And the way I look at it, community building and community organizing is a lot like a language. It's not about just seeing how big you can get it, how much you can get immediately. It's about having a real quality experience. It's about the journey, and it takes time and it takes persistence. You don't just do it and then stop and watch. You do it and then you keep going. Like if you use flashcards, you use the flashcards and then they come back up when you need them and you review them. Well, it's the same thing with the group. You don't just start a group and go, okay, great, I'm gonna leave now. Except that's kind of what I did when I went to Vietnam. But and what I saw, I'll tell you about in a moment, is there was a problem there. So you do need to keep going. But when you're growing the community, you're going to return to some of the other questions. And instead of asking, who do I want to be in the community, why don't you start asking, who is in my community right now? So what do you know about the community? Great thing about Meetup is that it allows you to ask questions of members when they sign up. So I ask, what languages do you speak? What are you interested in doing in this group? Those are the primary questions. And I'm a programmer. I work with a lot of data, so I can be really meticulous about data. So I've actually kept statistics about my members. I know that might sound creepy, but it's been very helpful for me. Might not work for you. But you can ask yourself these questions, and in my case, I ended up getting answers. Who's showing up? What age group-ish are they? Am I getting a lot of really young people? Am I getting a lot of retirees? Am I getting a whole range? Am I getting a lot of native English speakers or people from all over the world who come, you know, and then what do they want to do? What do they want to talk about? What languages do they speak? Are they people who've been studying languages for a long time? Or are they people who come because they really want to be a polyglot and they're just getting into it? You know, and it turns out it's been a whole range in my case. But if you look at that, it might affect what you do. So for me, this was very beneficial because I found out that the most common languages spoken were, of course, English. It is the United States. And in order was Spanish, French, Italian, German, Russian, and Portuguese. If anybody here lives in the States, that probably is not a surprising list or a surprising order. You know, obviously we have a lot of Spanish speakers, and the next most commonly studied language is French. But it was really great to see that, and to see that in terms of who even came. The fact that all these polyglots came still with that same general statistic affected what I did. So that's part of why we ended up having a second meetup, or a second conversation group that was just for Romance languages, because there were so many Romance language speakers that it was still very inclusive, and it allowed us to focus on some of the other things that we want to be able to do, like switch between two languages that are very closely related. Obviously a very difficult thing, we've all stumbled where maybe you're speaking Italian and then you switch to Spanish and all these Italian words come out and you go, how do I do, you know, but it takes practice. Well, in the group we got to do that with more focused. So the other thing that I learned was, for some reason, in terms of what I'm doing, people who are speakers of, not just native speakers, but also interested in speakers of the Middle Eastern languages and the South Asian languages are not showing up. They might become members, I might message with them, but they didn't really come. So that's something that I don't yet have a solution for that, for me, but it definitely makes me go, okay, how do I bring them in? Am I more inclusive? How do I grow the group in that direction so that we aren't just a Romance language group with the occasional German and Russian spoken, right? The other question you need to ask yourself is if it's time for the group to change. So early on in the group, we were just meeting and talking, and then we were meeting in a park, and it was summertime, and then it became September when it started to get cloudy in Seattle, and the oncoming 9 months of rain. Really, it is, but it's not pouring, but still, it started, and meeting in the park wasn't as feasible. Oh, let's sit for 2 hours in the park, get drenched. That sounds fun. No, that didn't really work. So we had to change our location. And we also found that just meeting up randomly wasn't quite the same. It also was a limiting factor for me because, as I said, in a cafe, it's not a very good place to give a presentation. The park was actually fine. We didn't have PowerPoints, but one person could talk about whatever they wanted to everybody else. And that was really effective. So when you look at the changes that you have to make, there are going to be times when you have to change things. It could affect a lot of things, and you need to be very very focused on what it is that might happen, what it is that might change in your group. So you can ask yourself things like, is this activity not working out anymore? Is our conversation group really not working? Are you getting complaints? Not just from the other person in the cafe who says, can you guys please speak less loudly because it's bothering me, but also from people within the group. Are they saying, hey, this isn't working for me and I feel like people don't even include me or whatnot? That's important. You have to figure out, why is that happening? You know, your job when you make a community is to help bring people together. And that means getting rid of the roadblocks that are in the way of them coming together. And then some seasonal constraints like the rain in Seattle, or the cold, or maybe you're finding that there are certain groups like South Asian language speakers that aren't showing up, or certain age ranges that aren't showing up. You know, there's a Gaelic speaking group that I go to every once in a while in Seattle, but it's on Fridays at 3 o'clock. And because I work for myself, I can go. But everybody else there either has a non-traditional work schedule or is retired, because it's Fridays at 3 o'clock, you know? So if you think about that, I mean, and they're great people, there's nothing about them, but there's a limit. You can't get a lot of people that might be interested because of when it is. And if you're wondering, why am I only getting retirees? Maybe you're scheduling on Fridays at 3 o'clock, you know, let's, and then also another question is the group splitting into multiple groups. Maybe you show up and everybody's there and then they always side with the same people and talk with the same people about two different things. Maybe you have people who love linguistics and want to talk about IPA and about grammar and about all those oddities, and then you have other people who just want to talk about their normal lives but they want to do it in other languages, and you're finding that they're not mixing. Does that mean maybe you have two separate times that groups mix? That they meet, rather? The two different kinds of meetups that you do? Questions to ask yourself. And then is there an interest that people really want that you can't accommodate, like a movie or presentations? Maybe you need to change something. But when it all comes down to it, it's still what I was saying, the idea of quality over quantity. It's better to have fewer people who are more enthusiastic than more people who are less interested. You're going to have a better experience. Everybody look around you. You've talked with a lot of these people. Nobody is coming to this event that doesn't love languages. This is not a group of really unenthusiastic people. When it starts, right? I mean, we all love this. So this is now huge, but it's not like the polyglot movement began with 300 people in a room or in a building in Berlin. No, it began with small pockets of enthusiasts who started to connect each other. Well, it's the same thing with your group. It's more important to have enthusiastic people and to find the people who are most engaged with your group. Find the people who most want to participate and to help, and accept their help. Because the more that you are trying to grow this group, the more work you're going to have to do. And the more it's going to feel like you're doing it all on your own. And that's really not fair to you, but it's also not fair to the people who are a part of the community, because they may very well want to be a part of creating that. They want to be doing this as well and help create this, because we're all enthusiastic. So accept help and make sure that everybody feels and is involved. You know, sometimes there have been a couple of times where I'll go to one of our meets and there'll be 6, 7 people talking and one person that nobody's really talking to, and I'll make the point of actively talking to that person. Because first of all, I mean, that's just not nice. It might not be happening on purpose, but it's just not nice when that person's not having a good time. And that person may very well be one of your most enthusiastic people. You know, they came because they care. And so your job making community is to connect with them and to help them feel like they're a part of the community. And it's because they are a part of the community, and they need to know that. And the more you do that, the more you can bring people together, the more your group will grow into something that you're actually looking to have. And just be persistent. It's just like a language. You don't stop studying and go, yeah, well, I'm going to get better this way, right? It's like, I don't need to study any more word lists. I'll just learn words by sitting and watching something in English when I'm trying to learn French. It doesn't work. You know, you have to keep going. And it's the same thing with the community. So just be persistent. And that's really it. I mean, I know for some of you, you might think, okay, so this guy stood up there and he talked about really obvious stuff and I don't know what to make of it. But that's the point. You know, it is obvious stuff, but it's not. It's stuff that when it's said, you go, oh, right, sure, duh. But when you're trying to do it, it's easy to forget. You know, and you have to remind yourself there are ways to be organized about this and make this work. And it's good to go back there and say, all right, what are those obvious things? You know, return to those questions of where, what, who, how, why, right? What are those obvious things that I need to do? And just keep going. So, thank you. And I didn't leave that much much time for questions because I really didn't know how long it would take. But also because, you know, we did talk a little bit throughout, but there is still some time for questions or for suggestions or anything. Whichever of you would like to go first.
So it was a great presentation.
Thank
I had
you.
a question about sort of cultivating a group where people participate and
Yeah.
really want to speak, especially at the beginning,
Yeah.
when you might have 4 or 5 people who don't know each other, and
Yeah.
you're just sitting in a cafe. Maybe if you could talk a bit about that.
About cultivating you mean the presentation specifically, like if people want to give a talk about something, or do you mean getting people just to talk to each other and they don't know each other?
Yeah, more the latter, getting people to talk when they don't really know each other, and for some people,
Right.
meeting
right.
new people already can be kind of a challenge, and then you're doing it in your second or third language. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question, and it is a good point. It can be a little difficult sometimes. It depends on you mostly. That's where, for those of you who are very extroverted, this might come very easily to you. Those of you who are introverted, you can do this, but it might be something like, oh, I hadn't really thought about how to do this. In my case, I'm an ambivert. It's a real word. Yeah. Ambivert, which basically means that I love people, but I'm overwhelmed by them, and I'm always lonely. So, the more extroverted part of me is more used to this going, these people actually have something to talk about and they don't know it. How can I just talk to them about that? So maybe you have, at the very beginning, you have 3 other people in the group, and you find out, oh, the 2 of you speak French. I happen to speak French. I'm going to make us have a conversation in French, right? And you force that to start it off. And then once they get going, you can, and the introverts here will be happy to hear this, you can step back and let them do their thing, and then go, oh, but there's this other person here. Oh, you speak Spanish, or, you know, and try and get them going. And sometimes you just get them talking about the language and not in the language, and it gets them to connect. So that's the most important thing. Is don't focus. You have to do the work, but what you do is help them find their commonalities. Because once they find it, they'll do it for you. Yes.
Thank you. I have 2 concrete suggestions to what you asked. So the first one, what I did at my vision talks, that is part of the concept, is that I do a check-in round where I encourage all the people to very briefly say their name and their passion. So the vision talk was not especially about languages, but you can adapt it to any topic, so it could be about languages. So if you open the round by just saying, okay, why are you here, and what is your specific passion about the languages, and everyone has just 1 to 3 minutes to talk about that. It creates such an amazing energy. You get to know the people, and they talk about their passions. So it's what is really them, and you connect to them immediately, and you're eager to talk to any of them. And it's just this check-in round, and then you can let people go, and the rest happens by itself.
Yeah.
So that was my approach. Another approach that I saw here in Berlin was a language cafe where they had tables. There was a flag for each language on every table.
Right.
And there was a host. So when I entered the cafe, the host would approach me and said, hello, what's your name? Oh, my name is this and this. What language would you like to practice?
Right.
And I saw there was a table for French, for English, for Japanese, whatever. And I said, what about Turkish? And he said, okay, there's no specific table for Turkish, but there's Ahmed, and if you wait for a second, I will get him for you.
And there you go, and that's a perfect example of exactly what I was saying to this gentleman that you do, where you go, oh, these 2 people need to communicate, and as the organizer, I need to be the one to show them that they're going to have a good time talking to each other. That's a great example.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I actually can't tell who had their hands up.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I just want to ask you, as another organizer myself, can you give me some concrete example of having to deal with participants as somehow disruptive or non-constructive, but specifically not the kind of disruption that would deserve like a kindly F off. But,
Right, not like somebody who just starts yelling and is walking around drunk.
Right.
Right. Yeah, sure. I give you two different kinds of things that are very subtle, but that I've had to deal with. One is there are a couple members of the group who, when they get really excited, which happens a lot when they're talking about language, start talking very loudly. And so I've made, and they're wonderful people, it's not a slight to them, it's just what they do. And when they're at home, I'm sure that's fine. When we're in the cafe and we're talking, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, and you know, that's what you have to remind them of that. And that's the most common thing that comes up. But there have been a couple other things where there are individuals who get very, how shall I put this? Sure of themselves that what they're saying is the way things are about a specific language because they're enthusiastic about it. And when people have differing opinions, they kind of get forceful about it. So I have had to be like, well, okay, I guess we have different opinions here about this, or and try and change the subject. You just need to be aware of watching people and going, are some people starting to get uncomfortable? Both in the group and outside of the group. Are people getting uncomfortable? Because if they are, can I change the subject? Can I make a change that'll happen right then and there? That's been the biggest thing that I've come across. Most common thing. Yeah, in the back. Can we get a microphone to the gentleman in the back? Thank you.
Yeah, we're
out of time. Though. Yeah.
And the photo shoot is very soon.
Yeah.
I think you'd like to participate in that. But maybe we have time for a quick question.
Yeah.
I thank you for the talk. I'm also an organizer of a language exchange. And one thing, I think one of the hardest things is how do we make it that we make an inclusive environment and that we accommodate everybody?
Yeah.
And I find in these kinds of exchange groups, you find a variety of, the level is different.
Yeah.
You have beginners and people going into their C1.
Yeah.
And that's really, really hard for me because I find people get left out, and that makes it's really something I have to deal with. So I was just wondering.
Sure, that's a real great point. That does happen a lot, and I find that that's where it comes to not just you, but trying to find the other individuals that are also enthusiasts, because that's when you need help. That's when you can't be the only person who's going, oh, okay, I speak French. This person's learning French, they're not very good at it, and I'm going to sit with them and patiently have that conversation with them. You might do that, but if there are multiple people like that, you need other enthusiasts to help do that too. That's the answer I have. It sounds like there's another quick solution.
And the suggestion that I have is that it's not just the organizer's responsibility to navigate that situation. Oftentimes when people are speaking to a Chinese speaker who doesn't know that much Chinese yet, I say to the other person that's speaking with them that please slow down for the speaker. And certainly anyone in the group can assist that way.
Yeah.
And since we're all responsible for creating a great event, I think it's time to give you a huge round of applause.